Do you believe art can change the world? So do I. On this show, we meet artists whose work is doing just that. Welcome to Art Heals All Wounds. I'm your host, Pam Uzel. Thank you for listening to this series of Art Heals All Wounds, focusing on artists whose work centers on climate and the environment. I have a confession to make. I'm feeling sad right now. Focusing on climate change for so many episodes means that I now think about it much, much more than I did before. It wasn't as if I was unaware of the ways that the burning of fossil fuels was impacting the planet, but it wasn't always the first thing on my mind. When I started this season, I wasn't naive in thinking that there was some kind of easy fix, but I had a glimmer of hope that Biden's climate agenda would not only continue, but expand, that there would be national infrastructure to expand electric vehicle use, that fragile ecosystems in the Arctic and in our oceans would be protected from the extraction of fossil fuels. The public lands would be protected, that clean energy would be prioritized as a way to meet the ever-increasing energy demands driven largely by tech, that there would be a focus on environmental justice for communities in this country most impacted by fossil fuel extraction and refining and other chemical manufacturing and spills. And I was really excited about the expansion of jobs. Building new infrastructure isn't cheap, but it does generate jobs in places that really need them. Biden's protection of public lands and what that would do to preserve not only clean water, but to protect the habitat of so many species had an approval rating of over 75%. But somehow, this new administration in place believes that it has a mandate to not only gut the EPA, but to fire the majority of staff who work in our public parks and on our public lands. Although I'm usually an optimist, all of this has left me feeling a bit gutted. I want to share one thing I did this season that was helpful for me in terms of not giving up hope. Kristen Tiesch, a filmmaker who was featured on Art Heals All Wounds last fall on October 16th, invited me to help curate and co-host a screening of films about climate and the environment made by local filmmakers here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We had about a month to do this in order to have it be a part of the Arts for the Future Festival, a global event that happened last September. We put together a program featuring 5 short films covering a range of topics. Kristen shared an excerpt from her film, The Invisible Mammal, about bats. There was a film from Cynthia Abbott, who produces films about those who care for our oceans, featuring an artist, Tess Felix, who creates portraits using plastic reclaimed from the ocean. Jimmy Ramirez, another guest on Art Heals All Wounds back in October, shared his film, Above Ground, about the fate of the natural waterways in Oakland, California. Ethan Lee, a high school student from the Bay Area, screened his film, Threads of Change, about the effects of fast fashion on the environment. And 3 middle school artists, Elisa Ching, Ashlyn Wong, and Sonia Shin, shared their film, What's at Stake, which showed how the overconsumption of beef contributed to global warming. People came, we all sat together and watched together. The filmmakers shared their experiences, the audience asked questions. I was most amazed by the responses of the youngest filmmakers, Ethan, Alicia, Ashlyn, and Sonia. They had a clear grasp of the challenges facing them, and they weren't despairing. They were thinking of solutions and ways that they might navigate the tumultuous environment we're in. One thing these youngest filmmakers emphasized was community. Find your community, exchange ideas, look for solutions and ways to create positive change. Listening to them speak gave me hope. When I feel despair now, I like to think about this event. The idea that people gave up their Saturday night to come talk about the environment and engage with artists who were doing work that showed not only the problems, but how they were being addressed and how they could be addressed. The youngest artists there weren't falling into despair. They were interested in finding creative solutions, and they want a life and a future. You're listening to Art Heals All Wounds. I want to thank everyone who listened to this series. You have no idea how much I appreciate all of you. Thank you to those who left voicemails and to those who donated to the show. The show is completely independent, so every donation really counts. Mostly, thank you to everyone for taking the time to listen to the interviews of these artists. Since it's the end of a series, I'll be taking a month off. I'll be back at the beginning of April with a new series about artists working in the field of healthcare. I hope you'll join me then in listening to these inspiring stories. Thanks for listening. And thank you to my amazing editor, Eva Hristova. The music you've heard in this podcast is by Ketsa and Lobo Loco. This podcast was edited by Eva Hristova.